Welcome to video 3 in the series, 7 Keys to be a Successful Speaker. Hi, I'm Michael Davis of Speaking CPR. In this video, you'll pick up tips on how to effectively open your speech. Open with a bang so you grab people's attention. You'll also pick up ideas on how to conclude your speech with a memorable ending that leaves people talking about you and, more importantly, acting on your message long after you talk. Enjoy the tips. One of the biggest challenges for speakers is how to effectively open their presentation. Now, there are several ways you can do this, but before we get into those, let's talk about what you shouldn't do to open your speech. Think about most presentations. How do the speakers begin? Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here today. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, isn't it great weather out there? You've probably heard a version of all of these at some point. It's how most speakers begin. Why should you not do that? The answers I get when I ask this question in workshops vary, but common answers are, it's boring, no doubt. It sounds like everyone else. It's not compelling. It's not exciting. All those reasons are right, and there are more. There's a deeper reason, though, that I think that I haven't heard too many people talk about. Think about the average audience. You've been a member of those many times, just like I have. What's going on in the minds of the people sitting there? While the speaker's being introduced, they're hearing about accolades, typically, but they're also thinking, well, I hope is this person going to be any good? What is this person's relevance? I hope this is worth my time. Now, those are the common responses I get when I ask people, what are audience members thinking? But think globally. Think outside the room. What are people thinking about aside from the speaker? They have thoughts like, oh my God, was today that day when that project is due? Is this weekend when we're getting together with the Johnsons? Oh my gosh, the kids, oh, they got soccer practice. They literally have hundreds of ideas that are running through their minds as you're being introduced and when you start. Now, I believe that audiences are preconditioned to expectations of what speakers will do or say. For example, I believe that every audience thinks that the speaker's first words are going to be, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. So what happens when the speaker meets their expectations and says exactly that? The audience, somewhere in the back of their minds, they're thinking, heard this before, I think I'll tune this guy out. And they start checking their phones, they look at their iPads, read the newspaper, whatever, you're losing them from your first words. So that's why you should not start with what I call boring platitudes. Now, am I saying don't be nice, don't be respectful, don't be thankful? Absolutely not. Just don't do it at the very beginning. Instead, grab their attention, pull them in, do something different. So how should you open a speech? There are literally dozens of tools that you could use and techniques. There are 5 in particular that I like to use. Actually, one is my favorite. It's the story. But there are 4 tools you can use to set up your story. The key to stories is they have to be relevant to your main point. They have to set it up. Secondly, they have to be short. 2 minutes at most is ideal. So what are the 4 tools you can use to set up your story? See, just telling a story may be confusing to the audience unless they have some context. So these 4 tools can help give context to the story so the audience isn't getting too aggravated by wondering, what's going on? Why am I hearing this story? The 4 tools are these: questions, quotes, statistics, or startling statements. For example, a financial planner might be giving a talk about retirement planning. Well, a startling statement could be 94% of Americans are not equipped or ready to retire if they lost their paycheck today. Wow, that'll get your attention. A question could be, how sure are you that if you lost your paycheck tomorrow, you could retire and maintain the same lifestyle? That could lead into a story about a client who thought they were ready and turned out they weren't, and they made some changes. but it sets up the main point of the story, which in this case would be retirement planning and strategies to use to ensure you have a comfortable retirement. So that is my favorite way to open. Use a story, but set it up with context. Actually, there is one other tool that I love to use that I like even more than storytelling. It's something that virtually no speaker uses, but if you do it, I promise you, it will grab people's attention immediately. What is this magic tool? Silence. Think about what I said before. The audience members' minds are full of all kinds of ideas as you're walking to the stage and you stand in front of them. The typical speaker will begin speaking even before the introducer is sitting down. There's no time for the audience to adjust to the fact that there's a new person on stage and now I need to give that person my attention. When you stand confidently in front of an audience, smiling, just looking at them, they're going to pay attention to you. I typically like to start with a 5 to 7 second pause, longer if I feel it's necessary. What's happening when you're standing there quietly is they may still have thoughts in their head, but you're not doing what every other speaker does. You're standing there. You're not saying anything. They might even start asking new questions. What's this person's problem? Or, oh my gosh, did he forget his speech? Either way, you've got the audience's attention, and that's what you want. Now, your job from that point forward is to be compelling enough to keep their attention, but you got to get it before you can keep it. So this is a great way to do it. I promise you, if you use this, this will pay off. I also promise you, if you're not used to doing this the first time you try it, you'll get sick to your stomach. Now, you may not get violently ill and throw up, but you're going to be uncomfortable. Know that's part of the process, because your brain is telling you that the audience is going to lose interest if you stand there saying nothing. Your brain is lying to you. How do I know this? Because it used to happen to me. When I broke through that barrier and started using silence, my openings got much more impactful. One last tip. If you're doing this, stop right now. Don't tell jokes to open your speech. I know this is a time-honored tradition among speakers, but we live in a different world now. If people want comedy, they've got plenty of comedy clubs they can go to. They can go on the internet. They can go on TV. Audiences today, they do want to be entertained. However, they want compelling information that can change their lives. They want content. Jokes are not content. They can derail your speech before you even get started. Think about this. What happens if your joke bombs and nobody laughs? Immediately, you're taken down a notch or two in their minds. Their expectations are lowered. They may even lose interest. Now, by this, am I saying don't be funny? Absolutely not. Humor can come from your best stories, typically in the dialogue out of your best stories. But that's uncovering humor. Just sticking jokes in to try to get a cheap laugh doesn't help your credibility. And it certainly doesn't emphasize the main point you're trying to make. So cut out the jokes. Rather than tell jokes, let the humor come from your stories. So that's how you open. Use a story. Set up your story with a contextual question, quote, startling statement, or statistic. And have the courage to use silence to grab their attention. Do all these, and I promise you will stand out from the crowd. Now get out there and create a compelling opening. Now that you've heard about how to open your speech, what are some tips that you can use to conclude effectively so that people take action on your message? Well, just like we did with the tip about how to open, let's talk first about what not to do when you conclude. Two mistakes that I see speakers make is, number one, they conclude on questions and answers, and secondly, they introduce new information into the speech right at the very end. Why shouldn't you conclude on questions and answers? Well, you lose control of your speech. One of my most important mentors in speaking has been a woman named Patricia Fripp. She's a Hall of Fame speaker, first female president of the National Speakers Association. Check out her website, by the way. She's fabulous. She has a great quote. Last words linger. The last thing that you say to an audience will be what they remember, but only if it's memorable. It should tie up your entire speech into one nice little package, one sentence that summarizes what this was about. When you end on questions and answers, this is almost impossible. The reason for this is because audience members can ask you anything. You can't control what they say. They could take you off topic. They might get controversial, maybe a little combative, although that's rare. You just never know where it's going to go. This keeps you from having control of your speech at the end, which is the most crucial time. Now, am I saying don't do questions and answers? Absolutely not. Do your Q&A about 80 to 90% of the way through the program. Set a time limit. Never say to an audience, I have time for 3 questions. What happens if each question is 5 minutes long? I'm only slightly exaggerating with some people I've talked to. But set a time limit. I have 5 minutes for questions. And if you have more after my speech, I'll be here for a few minutes. I'll be happy to talk to you. That enables you to control the conclusion and lead into your final thoughts. The other challenge that I see that speakers have is they will often introduce new material at the end. You're sitting there in the audience, you're listening, you've heard a good presentation, it's had good stories, you've got a strong conclusion, but all of a sudden they keep talking. That's frustrating because now I don't know what the speaker's point is and I'm ready for them to be done. There's a rhythm to a speech and they've just destroyed it. This happens far too often. Now, an exaggerated example of this I use to prove my point is Dr. Martin Luther King's speech. Imagine, it's April 1963. He's standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. He's got 250,000 people in front of him. And he gets to that beautifully crafted and delivered final thought. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And then imagine when he was done, if he had looked at the audience and said, and another thing, we got to do something about our education system in this country. People would have been looking around like, where's he going with that? Where did that come from? Now again, I exaggerate, but really, I hear it all too often in speeches and it destroys people's ability to leave a lasting imprint. So do not introduce new information. All right, you know what not to do. What should you do? There are many ways to conclude your speech. I love what's called the circle back technique. Go back to the opening that you've used and reintroduce that. For example, if you've used a startling statement, a statistic, a question, or a quote, refer back to those. The audience should have a different perspective on those because of the content of your message. So for example, if a financial planner came out and gave a statistic that said 92% of all Americans are not on a path to retire comfortably, then the person gives his or her information, their content, they can throw that statistic back out and say, now you know how you don't have to be part of the 92%. The audience should have a different perspective on that statistic. Same thing with the question, the quote, or the startling statement. If you've started with a story, maybe you don't complete your story in the beginning, you complete it at the end. Again, the people will have a different perspective on how to look at your subject because of the content you've delivered. Now that is the technique that I use. Other people have used poems, songs, even read sections of books. The important point to remember here is this. Your conclusion is the last thing people are going to hear. And if it's delivered well, if it ties into your main point, it will make your message more memorable. It will increase the opportunity that people will act on your message, whatever it is you want them to do. So conclude with power and watch your impact go up. I hope you've enjoyed these 7 tips in these 3 videos. And because it's the season of giving, I got a little bonus for you. Tomorrow, you're going to get a link to a bonus video. We're going to talk about 3 ideas on how you can improve your stories. Storytelling is a key to effective presenting, and a lot of people just don't know how to do it well. So keep an eye out for this video. Also, if you'd like to dive deeper into this subject of how to be a successful public speaker, You'll have an opportunity at the end of that next video to hear about a program that we're releasing soon that can help you dive deep so you can become a master at presenting. So thank you again for watching these 3 videos. Keep an eye out for the bonus, and you can hear about our special program that's coming up. I look forward to speaking with you in the next video.